Hey everyone, and welcome back to Mastering Medicine video lectures. Today we're gonna discuss skeletal muscle structure, its different functions. We will talk about mechanism of contraction of skeletal muscle. Then we will talk about neuromuscular junction and mechanics of skeletal muscle. So first of all, you don't need to illustrate and write all these contents. I have already prepared them as a mastering PDF lecture notes. Click on website link and download them. Next, during this lecture, first of all, I'll discuss the basic histology of skeletal muscles. Then we will talk about the basic structure of muscle fiber. Then we will talk about sarcomere, its related all contents. Then we will talk about neuromuscular junctions, and also we will talk about mechanism of skeletal muscles contraction. Then we will talk about mechanics of skeletal muscle, and also we will talk about isometric and isotonic contractions. And then we'll talk about muscle fatigue, energy sources of skeletal muscle, and also we will talk about some drugs and diseases related to skeletal muscles. So let's get started. First of all, from previous lectures, we know that when cells come together, they are going to make different types of tissues. Okay, and we have four types of basic tissues in our body, and the first one is epithelial tissue, which has rule in covering of body surface from inside and outside. The second one is connective tissue that has rule and connection of different types of tissues. And the third one is skeletal. The third one is a nervous tissue that we've already talked about it in previous lectures. And today we're going to talk about the fourth basic tissue, which is called muscle tissue. Which is called muscle tissue. Now, a muscle tissue is a type of tissue which is contractile. It means it has the ability to go from resting membrane potential to action potential and produce contraction and causes movement of different bones and some other functions. And also muscles, okay, all muscles have this capability to go from resting membrane potential to action potential. And these types of cells are called in our body excitable cells. So they are excitable, okay? And also muscles are elastic tissue in our body. They have this capability. When you stretch them, they have this capability to come back to their original position, which is called elasticity. So now, all muscles in our body is divided into three basic types. The first one is called skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscles make up around 40% to 45% of our total body fat. So this is very important. The second type of Muscle tissue is in our body smooth muscle. Okay, and they make up around around 10 to 15% of total body weight. And third one is cardiac muscle. Third one is cardiac muscle. Okay, which is so less in our body, but it's so important in our body, and it has rule to make our heart. Today we're going to talk about skeletal muscles. Now, let me talk about skeletal muscles. First of all, we have some other names for skeletal muscles also. Skeletal muscles are also called, striated muscles. It means when you look cells of skeletal muscles under the microscope, they appear striated. It means you will find some dark and white, dark or light lines across their cells. That's why they are called striated muscles. And also, skeletal muscles are called voluntary muscles. Voluntary means that its innervation or its control is unconsciously or in its under our control. For example, we know that nervous system is basically made of two parts: central nervous system, and central nervous system is furthermore made of brain and spinal cord, and nervous system is made of peripheral nervous system. All those fibers which leave spinal cord and CNS as a collectively, and all those fibers which come to the CNS, it means to the spinal cord and brain, all of them are as a collectively called peripheral nervous system. And peripheral nervous system is furthermore divided into two basic parts. Some of them are sensory, which carry sensation from the body to the CNS, and some of them are motor, that they cause a lot of effects, production of a lot of effects in our body. For example, they cause movement of different parts of the body. So they are called sensory. That's why peripheral nervous system is furthermore divided into two parts: sensory nervous system and motor nervous system. This motor nervous system is furthermore divided into two basic parts. One part of motor nervous system is called somatic nervous system, and this somatic nervous system is under our control. And one part of this motor nervous system is called autonomic nervous system, which are further divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So these skeletal muscles are innervated by somatic nervous system. Skeletal muscles are innervated by somatic nervous system. And fibers for innervation of skeletal muscle system are come from anterior gray horn. You know, when you cross section the spinal cord, you will find some white areas and gray areas, and these gray areas have some horns which are called anterior gray horn, posterior gray horn, and lateral gray horn. So somatic nervous system, fibers of somatic nervous systems come from anterior gray horn. It means innervation of skeletal muscle system is from anterior gray horn. So that's why they are also called voluntary muscles in our body. Okay. Now Let's study about skeletal muscle furthermore. Approximately all skeletal muscles are connected to the bones. That's why they are called skeletal muscles. So all skeletal muscles are connected to the bone in two ways. Okay, one way is direct way, which is called direct connection between skeletal muscles and bone. And direct connection is that the connective tissue of a skeletal muscle bundle is directly connected to the connective tissue of the bone. And the connective tissue on bone is periosteum, and connective tissue over skeletal muscle is called epimysium. So epimysium is directly connected to the periosteum. Got it? This is called direct connection between skeletal muscle and bones. Another way of connection between skeletal muscles and bones are indirect. Okay, and connection indirect connection indirect connection is furthermore divided into two parts. It means that we have some connective tissues between skeletal muscles and between bone, and these connective tissues are two types. Some of them are cord-like, long, thick structure, round cord-like structure, and these are called tendon. These are called tendon. These are called tendon. Tendons. Tendons. Okay, and some of them are flat type of connective tissue, which are called aponeurosis. So connection between skeletal muscle and bones are direct and indirect. And indirect connection is maintained through aponeurosis and tendons. Now, let's talk a little bit more about skeletal muscle. We have different functions of skeletal muscle. For example, one function of skeletal muscle in our body is that they have rule in body movements. Okay, for example, when you want to move some bones, or if you want to move some things, when you want to walking, okay, so all of them occur by the help of skeletal muscles. This is one function of skeletal muscle. Next function of skeletal muscle is that it helps us to maintain body posture. Okay, do you know posture? Posture means that now I'm standing against the gravity. Okay, so this posture is maintained by these skeletal muscles. This is called posture. Okay, the next function of skeletal muscles is that they have rule in production of heat during shivering. Okay, for example, the weather is so cold, so some shivering occurs in your body, and this shivering causes production of heat. Okay, so this is another function of skeletal muscle. And also all skeletal muscles have rule in protection of different body organs. Okay, they help us to protect body organs from the outside. And also another function of skeletal muscle is that it has rule in respiration. It's so important. Okay, especially the muscle which is called diaphragm. Diaphragm is one of the most important muscle in respiration physiology. Okay, and so on. Now, Let me talk about one muscle. This muscle is called biceps brachii muscle. Okay, this is a muscle which is called bicep brachii muscle. Biceps brachii muscle. Now, one end of bicep brachii is connected to the scapula bone, and another end of biceps brachii is connected to the radius bone. Okay, and we know that we have two areas of connections of biceps brachii and scapula. Okay, but anyway, generally, I'm talking generally. Now, when this biceps brachii go to goes to contraction, okay, for example, this is contraction of this muscle, so it causes movement of this elbow and radius and ulnar bones. Okay, now this end of bicep brachii, which is connected to the scapula bone, this is stable. It doesn't cause movement of this bone. So this part of a skeletal muscle, of all skeletal muscles, this part of all skeletal muscles which doesn't cause movement of a bone, this part is called origin. This part is called origin of a skeletal muscle. And this end of skeletal muscle which causes movement of a bone, this is called insertion. This is called insertion. And always a muscle contracts from its insertion toward its origin. Got it? So this was about the origin and insertion of skeletal muscles. Do you have any problem? So now let's move on. Now let's study about the basic structure of a skeletal muscle. For example, this is a bicep brachii muscle. This is connected through a tendon to these bones, okay, or to this one bone. Now, in our body, some skeletal muscles are covered by a type of connective tissue which is called deep fascia. But in some areas of our body, we don't have this type of connective tissue which is called deep fascia. Now, beneath the deep fascia, we have a cover of connective tissue. For example, this is a bicep brachii. We have a cover of connective tissue around this, which is called, this is, for example, this is this cover, okay? This is called epimysium, okay? Now, when you study a bundle of a skeletal muscle, you will find some small bundles inside of this. For example, my hand is a muscle, okay, and you will find some small bundles inside of this muscle, and as a collectively these bundles are called fascicles. As a collectively these bundles are called fascicles. So this is one fascicle, this is another fascicle, this is another fascicle, and so on. Now, if you study one fascicle, for example, now my hand is one fascicle. So you will find more long structured fibers, which are called as a collectively muscle fibers. For example, this is a muscle fascicle. And first of all, we have a type of connective tissue around each fascicle also, which is called as a collectively perimysium. So epimysium is around whole muscle bundle, and perimysium is around each fascicle. Now, inside each fascicle we have muscle fibers. For example, this is a muscle fascicle. These reds are muscle fibers. Now, when you look at muscle fiber, first of all, you will find around it a type of connective tissue which is called endomysium. So as a collectively, epimysium, perimysium, and endomysiums are called muscle sheets. Okay, and function of muscle sheet is that it provides attachment between fascicles, and it provides attachment between fascicles, between muscle fibers, okay, and so on. And also it helps us in stretching of muscles, that we will talk about it later. But now let's talk about a muscle fiber. First of all, keep it in your mind that from outside to inside, a muscle fiber is covered by a connective tissue which is called endomysium. Beneath the endomysium, we have cell membrane, because muscle fibers are cell of skeletal muscles, because they are long, their structure is longitudinal, they lead longitudinally. That's why they are called muscle fibers. Okay, now, so we know that each cell or each muscle fiber has a cell membrane, and here cell membrane is called sarcoplasm. Now, imagine my hand is a muscle fiber. Inside a muscle fiber, you will find long cord-like structures which are called as a collectively myofibrils, myofibrils. Now we are going to study about a myofibril, but before to dive into myofibril, let me talk a little bit about sarcolemma and muscle fiber characteristics and so on. First of all, a muscle fiber is multinucleated. It means it has a lot of nucleases inside it. Second one, a muscle fiber is a type of excitable cell, because they have this capability to go from resting membrane potential to the action potential, that we will talk about it later on under the title of muscle contraction. Next, for example, this is a sarcolemma, okay, around a muscle fiber, okay. This is a sarcolemma, this green color. In each sarcolemma, we have a deep tubule-like structure that goes from the outside to the inside, deep to the cytoplasm or to the sarcoplasm of muscle fiber, and this is called T-tubule or transverse tubule. Okay, this is so important. And next one, inside the sarcolemma or muscle fiber, we have some proteins which are called cytoskeleton of a cell. We have one very important protein in cytoskeleton of skeletal muscle fibers, which is called dystrophin protein. This is so important because mutation in this gene and protein which is going to make dystrophin, okay, mutation in this gene causes some disease, and these diseases are called Duchenne and Becker syndrome, and they're X-linked diseases. It means that these diseases depend to X chromosome. Got it? Now let's talk about a myofibril structure. When you look a muscle fiber under the microscope, you will find some longitudinal structures inside a muscle fiber which are called myofibrils. Okay, now if you have hundreds of myofibril in a muscle fiber, we are going to study only one myofibril, and structure of all myofibrils are same to each other. Now, when you look a myofibril under the microscope, first of all, you will find some zigzag-like lines, okay? And these zigzag-like lines are called Z lines. For example, this is a myofibril, and these Z lines are called, these zigzag lines are called Z line, or these are called Z discs. Got it? Now, space between two Z line. This is one Z line, this is another Z line. Space between these two Z line is called sarcomere. This space from this point up to this point, this is called sarcomere. Now, sarcomere is the basic functional and structural unit of a myofibril, and myofibrils are basic structural and functional units of a muscle fiber, and muscle fibers are basic structural and functional units of fascicles, and fascicles are basic structural and functional units of a muscle bundle. Now we're going to talk about the basic structure of a sarcomere, and structure of all sarcomeres are same to each other. Now, this is one sarcomere. First of all, in a sarcomere, you will find some thick and thin filaments. For example, this protein is a little bit thick and this protein is a little bit thin. This one is also thick and this one is also thin. For example, let me explain it here. Okay. For example, this is a myofibril. Now, these are Z discs. Okay. Now, when you look a sarcomere, the space between two Z discs is called sarcomere. When you look a sarcomere, you will find these these thick structures, which are called thick filament, and also you will find some thin protein structures, and these are called thin filament. Now let's study about thick filament and thin filament. First of all, we will study about thick filament. Thick filament is also called myosin filament. It's also called myosin filament. A thick filament is made of a protein which is called myosin. Now, a molecule of a myosin protein is made of 6 chains of proteins. 2 of them are heavy. For example, this one. This is one heavy chain. Okay. This one is another a heavy chain, and these two are 1, 2, and 1, 2. These two are light chains. So as a collectively, a myosin filament or a myosin molecule is made of 6 chains of protein. Now, a myosin molecule is made of 3 parts. One part of it is called tail of myosin, which is made of heavy chain of protein. The next part is called neck of myosin or lever arm. Okay, lever arm, because literally it acts like a lever. We will study it later. And a third part of a myosin molecule is called a head of myosin. Now, a head of myosin and neck of myosin is made of some parts of heavy chain, and each head of a myosin molecule is made of two light chains. Okay, so one myosin molecule has two heads. Got it? Now, when a lot of myosin molecules come together, for example, this is a myosin of protein, this is a myosin molecule, this is a myosin molecules. A lot of myosin molecules come together and they're going to make a thick filament. Okay, so this is a thick filament, and the basic structural unit of a thick filament is myosin protein. Now, this part of this hanged part of myosin filament or thick filament is called cross bridge. They are called cross bridges. Okay, a cross bridge is made of neck or lever arm, and it's made of head of myosin. And literally we will study that these head of myosin or these cross bridges causes contraction of a skeletal muscle. That's why this is very important. Now let's talk a little bit about thin filament. A thin filament in a sarcomere is made of three basic proteins. Okay, but the most important protein in a thick filament is called actin filament or actin protein. Let me explain it. When you join a lot of globular structure proteins which are called globular actins, when you join all of them, they are going to make F actin or filamentous actin. So this is one F actin which is made of a lot of G actins. Each globular actin or each G actin has an area to bind to the head of myosin, which is called active site of globular actin. This is so important, okay? And it's very easy. Now, when two F actin, this is one F actin, and this is another F actin. When two F actins come together, they're going to make a thin filament. So the basic structural unit of a thin filament is F actin. Got it? Now, let me explain this. This is so important. These are head of myosins. They want to join to the active sides of thin filament. When they join to the active sides of thin filament, they cause the thin filament to slide over each other. When these two thin filaments slide over each other, they cause to bring these Z lines close together. When you bring these two Z lines close to each other, it means you shrink this myofibril. It means in same time you shrink thousands of myofibrils. When you shrink thousands of myofibrils, it means you shrink muscle fiber. When you shrink a muscle fiber, it means you shrink muscle fascicle. When you shrink a muscle fascicle, it means you shrink a muscle bundle. When a muscle bundle is shrinked, it causes to pull this tendon and causes movement of a bone. That's why the head of myosin and thin filament is very important. So normally before contraction of a skeletal muscle, this active sites of thin filaments are separated by these proteins, and these proteins are called tropomyosin. These proteins are called tropomyosin. Let me explain it here. These are active sites of globular actin. You know that active sites of globular actins are covered by this protein which is called tropomyosin. This is called tropomyosin. Got it? Now, this is a state before contraction, but during contraction, these two tropomyosins go deeper into the groove between these two thin filaments. Got it? And because it's to uncover the active side of globular actin, and that's why head of myosin will bind to the thin filament that we will talk about it in full details later on. Got it? So a thin filament is made of three proteins. Number one, it's made of actin proteins. Number two, it's made of tropomyosin. Number three, a thin filament is made of a protein which is called troponin. Let me explain you troponin. This is a troponin protein. A troponin protein has three sides, three parts. One side of troponin protein is called troponin T. Okay. One side of a troponin protein is called troponin I. One side of troponin protein is called troponin C. Now, I'll explain it later that during contraction, calcium ions come here and they bind to the part of troponin which is called troponin C. And due to binding of these calcium, the part of troponin which is called troponin T, it goes to some conformational changes. Okay, and this troponin T part of a troponin causes dislocation of tropomyosin, and that's why when this tropomyosin uncovers the active sites of globular actin, it uncovers these sites by the help of troponin T part. Okay, and troponin I part, it has a role in inactivation of active part of globular actin also. Okay, so in a nutshell, we will study that during contraction, calcium will come here and it causes activation of troponin protein, and troponin protein causes dislocation of tropomyosin and activation of active site of globular actin. Got it? So as a collectively, a thin filament is made of three basic proteins. It's made of actin protein, it's made of tropomyosin protein, it's made of troponin protein. This part was a little bit hard, and the next part will be easy, don't worry. Now let's come back to the sarcomere. When you study a sarcomere, you will find Z lines. Okay, the space between two Z lines or two Z discs is called sarcomere. And now in a sarcomere you will find thick filament and you will find thin filaments. Okay, now in middle part of a sarcomere you will find a protein which is called M line, M means middle. Okay, now this M line furthermore stabilize these thick filaments. Got it? Now these thick filaments are connected to the M line and to the Z disc by a protein which is called titin protein. And these thin filaments are connected to the Z line by a protein which is called nubulin, by two proteins which are called nubulin and alpha actinin. Nubulin and alpha actinin. Got it? Now, now let's study some spaces between two sarcomeres and in some areas of a thin filament. Now, this area, if you look this part of sarcomere from this upper part to the down part, you will find some dark striation or dark lines. For example, like here, this is a thick filament, this is a thick filament, this a thick filament. This dark area of a sarcomere is called a band. This is sarcomere, okay? This is called a band. A means an isotropic band, okay? It means it's not sensitive to isotropic light, and as a collectively it appears under the microscope a little bit dark. Got it? Now, between these two, for example, this is one a band, okay? This is another a band. Between these two a bands, for example, this an a band, this is an a band, this is an a band, you will find an area which is a little bit lighter than the a band, and this area is called I band. I mean isotropic band. An isotropic band is made of thin filaments and Z lines. Got it? Now this is thin filament. Between these thin filament, this is a thin filament, this is a thin filament, and in each side of an M and in each side of a M line we have two thin filaments. Now this a little bit space between two thin filaments, this space, for example here it looks here very good. For example, this area, okay, between two thin filaments, this area is called H zone. This is called H zone. This area is called H zone. It's so important because after contraction H zone will be disappear, okay, but we'll talk about it later. So this was all about, and also we have a protein related to the M line which is called creatine kinase protein, and it help us to maintain a lot of energy from phosphocreatine. Got it? This was all about the basic structure of a muscle fiber and myofibril. Now let's move on to the next part of our lecture, which is mechanism of contraction of a myofibril. Now we will study that how nervous system causes contraction of a skeletal muscle and movement of bones in our body. Let's get started.